There's been a lot of people over the years who have asked me to be on podcasts, speak on stages, and share what my journey has been in real estate from starting off in 2008 to now being the broker of record at Blue Moon Realty. And it has been an interesting share where honestly, I have not necessarily gone into all of the details. There's been a lot of things that have happened in secret in my career, some really amazing things, and some really challenging things. And I'm at a point in my life and in my career where I am ready to divulge all of the information that's going to be super incredibly helpful for those who are just entering the industry. I am really passionate about uplifting the professionalism and level of expertise, energy that we bring into this space as new agents. And I'm also really passionate about how we need to get a little bit more vulnerable into the truths and the reality of realty. So, today, as we are starting off on, I'm going to say a fresh energy on this channel. If you have been following me before, thank you so much for being here as you have watched my journey into spiritual business coaching, as well as teaching others how to follow the natural cycles of moon phases, and now really getting into all aspects of myself integrated into one. I used to be somebody that really struggled with social anxiety, and nowadays I come across others that knew me way back when I started my career that honestly don't even recognize me. The first time I heard somebody say, "I don't even know who you are anymore," was really odd to me because I thought, what do you mean? Like, I'm exactly who I always was. I'm just showing you that person. And it has been a fascinating way to have kind of an observer role to my life to see how other people used to view me versus how I viewed myself. And this natural progression into realizing that my social anxiety actually came from somewhere very particular. And also why it was that real estate as a career was the most triggering thing that I could do as a person to heal all of those parts of me that had nothing to do with the job itself. So, I'm going to be sharing deeper and deeper into those parts of my story as you follow along here. But today, I want to answer the question of like, how did I get started in real estate and how did I end up where I am today as the owner, the founder, and broker of record of a boutique real estate brokerage that is doing things quite differently to the standard in our industry. So, starting off in 2008, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was even getting in store for in saying yes to taking my real estate courses. I was 19 years old when I left home, originally from Calgary, Alberta, and I left home to go to school for fashion design. And I was quite the passionate, creative person at the time. I have always been a dreamer. You can read about that in my book, Home of the Soul, where I talk about all of the really interesting synchronicities that have led me to this multifaceted version of an entrepreneur that you see today. And I left for not the whole dream of being some incredible fashion designer that was going to travel the world and have these beautiful displays of my creations. That's what I told people that I was leaving to do. I was moving to Toronto for my fashion design school, but what really was happening internally that I was not telling anyone. I was really good at faking, at masking, at pretending that everything was okay. And it was a skill that I have had to try and figure out how not to use as much in my career today. And I'll tell you why later on in future videos. But the reason I actually left home was because I grew up in a really low income area. I grew up going to a school that had a lot of gang activity, that had a lot of drug activity, that had a lot of violence. And I faced a lot of what today people might say bullying back then, but it was a lot heavier than that. It was a lot more dangerous than that. And there was times in my life where I legitimately feared for my life growing up. There was times going through school where I had interactions with those that I had grown up with and had really close friendships with where those people turned on me. And it became this level of how do I figure out how to continue to be me in integrity in my high school years where I didn't want to be the girl that went to all of the parties, that was just getting drunk and getting high. And I didn't want to be that person that I could see didn't have the future that I truly knew that I was deserving of. Even though I didn't have necessarily the support at home that told me that I could be something greater, I felt it. I felt it from a very young age. I had no idea how I was going to get there. And when I got this glimpse, this hope, this tiny little hope that I was able to grab onto in moving to another province, to be on my own, to pursue a career in something that was really creative, I thought, this is it. Like, this is it. This is what I was meant to do. I did the typical Katie thing and I didn't look into the details, didn't sit down and do a spreadsheet that says when you're a fashion designer, this is the income that you will make. And here's how you're going to support yourself. And here's why this is it, Katie. Mm-mm. Instead, I did the typical dreamer thing where I thought somehow I was going to be like this really amazing fashion designer. I laugh because I still have that spirit within me. I always think I'm going to be the next like really great thing because I am. To me personally, I love myself so very much at this point in my life. But at that point, I needed some sort of external validation to say, Katie, when you leave these surroundings and this difficult childhood and the traumas and this high school that is so toxic and dangerous, you will become something, is what this tiny little voice in my head thought. So, the one thing that allowed me to pursue my dream, remember, I'm not coming from a family that has income to send me across the province to go to a school that was very expensive and live on my own in a city that is very expensive. I didn't have the opportunity to do that. And the only way that this worked was last minute, months before, I actually had a settlement come through for a very bad car accident that I was in when I was 16. And when I was 16, I was someone that had already bought a car, was a junker of a car. But when I was able to actually go for my driver's license on my 16th birthday, I already owned a car. And I had this vision that I was going to be able to escape and have freedom from my life, the difficulty that was going on in that high school. I was going to be able to drive away on my own and sit in my car and just feel safe and at peace during my lunch hour, where I didn't have to try and pretend to find somebody to go to lunch with, where I could feel just safe sitting there for a moment, not worried about who was after me. So, getting my driver's license at 16 years old was this incredible accomplishment that didn't happen because I had a lot of drive. It happened because I had a lot of fear. A lot of fear of if I didn't have somewhere to go on my own at my lunch hour, my life was going to get much, much worse. And it was a huge thing that allowed me to save enough money working part time while going to school to buy this first Ford Tempo that I had. And I was really proud of it. So I'm going to my driver's test that day on my 16th birthday, the day that I'm going to be allowed to drive on my own. And I'm sitting there with the exam driver instruction guy beside me. And we're going through, and I'm thinking, like, I'm great at this. This is great. I got this totally covered. And I'm not even thinking about the test, the physical driving test that I'm doing at the moment. I'm thinking about how when I'm done there, I get to go, I get to drive wherever I want all by myself. And the freedom of it was captivating. There was no way that wasn't going to be the next hour after this. What happened though was I pull up to the parking space back to the building, and the guy's on his clipboard and he looks over to me and he says, I should really fail you. And I looked at him and I thought, what? Like, I couldn't even understand what I had done wrong. And there was a lot of things. I was just way too in another world. And I was just excited, but I really was a good driver. I'd been driving since I was 14 years old in this car. And at that time, let me tell you, you were able to get a learner's permit in Alberta to drive with another individual that was licensed. So I was totally allowed to have bought my own car and to be driving at that time, in case you're wondering. And he says, I should really fail you right now, but you know what? I'm not going to because it's your birthday today. And I thought, oh my goodness, like it is my birthday today and this is magic. I totally made this happen, even though it shouldn't have happened. And I got my driver's license that day. And very, very shortly after, I am going to lunch escaping what felt like a prison of this high school and the people that were there and the interactions I was having. And I'm driving on my lunch break. And as if no other thing but fate itself, all of a sudden, as I'm crossing an intersection, and this is a very dangerous intersection in the sense that there's a lot of things going on. There's a fair amount of traffic that's going up and down, but there's also a set of crossings for the LRT, which is kind of like the subway system here in Toronto that goes over top the ground, though it's not underground. And so there's lights, that make everything stop for the traffic to not cross when this train is about to pass. And I am going parallel with where these train tracks are, and I have a green light and I'm driving along when suddenly somebody runs the red light, floors it across the train tracks, manages to get across, and plows right into me, the only person in this intersection, right on my driver's side door. I spin around, the whole car is totaled. I'm in absolute shock. And right in that intersection, there happens to be somebody who's watching, who's waiting at the red light, and they are paramedics, EMT, firemen. There happened to be people there that were off duty sitting in their vehicle that watched. And this car accident that happened left me with quite a few injuries and a lot of things that I had to overcome through physio later on. And I never actually met the gentleman that hit me because he was in such a state of shock or I don't know at the time that I'll never forget. I look over and he is still clutching his wheel of his vehicle, sitting in there just straight looking ahead. No interactions with anyone. He was just blank. He never got out of his car. They took me into the ambulance, and I never obviously met the gentleman or spoke with him later. He was, as far as I know, okay afterwards, but it shook both of us. And I don't know why he floored it across that intersection that day. It is quite a mystery because it could have been even worse with the train tracks there. But all I know is that I was impacted, and from that car accident, I actually received then, years later, when I was 19 years old, trying to figure out how am I going to get out of this situation where I'm in? There is no future I see for myself here to grow into the person that I want to be unless I get out of here. There's such a thing as sometimes your environment is not conducive to the person that you're going to be. Sometimes an environment is not the right environment in which you are going to grow as a person, and there's no potential. The soil is not rich enough for you to sprout roots and actually just bloom into this thing that you know in your heart that you're meant to be. And I had that feeling. I knew it from a very young age. My mom tells me to this day, I knew one day I was going to have to prepare myself for you to leave. You were going to leave this town. So the hardest thing, one of the hardest things that had happened to me during that year and having that car accident and physically going through the trauma of it and not understanding why did this happen? And my car was demolished, the thing that gave me freedom. Why did this happen? Actually connected years later to be the thing that allowed me right at the very moment when I wanted to go and be my own person, to have enough money to put myself through school, to move across the country by myself to another place to start a new version of self. And I thought it was it. Like, this is it. My life is, wow, this is happening for me. Well, there was a lot more that was about to happen. And I'm not, in case you're wondering, the biggest fashion designer, but I did bring with me a lot of things into my current role that I learned during that time. And I met some people that were really key to my growth during that process. So sometimes things happen for you that you don't realize are going to connect later on. And I found myself in fashion design school, and then I faced all of a sudden yet another issue where the money that I had received from that car accident, it wasn't enough. I was a dreamer, remember? So I thought that everything was always going to work out. And it was going to work out, but boy, was I going to have to face a lot of battles in order for things to work out. I had to say yes to a lot of things. I felt really uncomfortable. And I found myself in my second year completely about to run out of money and no plan really. And I had just met a wonderful man online. That is a whole nother magical story for another day. And I realized that, oh my goodness, like I've been dating this person for a couple of months. I'm going to have to tell them that I actually think that I have to drop out of school and drive myself back home because I can't even fly back home. I don't have enough means to stay here. And I remember sharing that information, and this man ended up being my husband now, 15 years today, Robert. And he's a very logical person, and I could see his wheels turning already. And we were only dating for a few months, but like this was it. We knew we were it quite early on in our relationship. And him thinking like, what am I gonna what am I gonna do? I could see it hitting him. And so that conversation ended that day. He was ending up going to see some family in another city. And so we had a bit of space. And that week, I received really interesting news. A couple of things lined up that financially shouldn't have been possible. And I received a scholarship that I never applied for from a province that I thought gave me nothing but grief. And to this day, I have no idea, but I actually received a scholarship for half of what my tuition was for my entire courses that I was taking for fashion design. I received the money for it without ever applying for a scholarship. And it was because of, I was told in the letter when I received it that it was because of my grades and how just a whole bunch of these wonderful things that were actually true. And I was like, who knows this? Where somebody must have submitted something. I don't know to this day. I chose not to ask any questions to find out how this was happening, but it allowed me to stay and continue my journey. And after I ended up graduating and realizing I love a lot of things about this industry and being creative in the fashion aspect and just creating the runway shows and stuff was really thrilling and being in the space. But I also realized I had a whole bunch of other things that I wanted to do with my life. And one of those things being the fact that on a list, when I was really young, I wrote down all of the things that I was going to accomplish when I was older. And one of them was to be a real estate agent. Now, the first time I remember I wanted to be a real estate agent was like 5 years old. Yes, I know why. I don't know, but I was in my heart very early on. And I don't come from a real estate family, meaning my parents, my siblings, my people I grew up with, nobody, I didn't know any real estate agents growing up. It wasn't part of my vibe. It wasn't part of anything that was going on in my life, but it was in my heart. And I really loved to pretend to write fake contracts when I was a little girl. I used to love to pretend to be a secretary. I loved paperwork. I would create these stacks of things and I just loved paperwork. I don't, again, know why, but it is something that I am really good at in my current role as broker of record, just creating these incredible processes and forms and paperwork that our agents are able to utilize to help them be great at what they do and to help and serve their clients. And so I find myself wanting to be other things as well. And working as a visual merchandiser at the time, putting my creative skills to use. And I say to my now very sort of serious boyfriend, Robert, that I am wanting to take my real estate license. So we move through this process and I get my real estate license. Okay, so finally, yes, I know we're at the part of how did you get from there to here? 2008, I get licensed. And again, I've got this spirit about me that this is the thing that's going to change my life. I am finally in the role. I get my creative abilities that I'm doing and my side stuff that I do as a fashion, I want to say fashionista because I'm really not doing much of designing, but I'm just pulling forward all the elements into my personal life and my design choices of what I'm wearing, but I also get to have this side of me that's going to grow this career and I get to do paperwork and contracts and let that part out of me that's really passionate. And then the I don't know if you remember 2008, but this was like the depression era, one that we experienced that was very difficult financially and the economy and the housing market and just so many things happened where it was a very difficult market to have started your real estate career in. And I did zero transactions that year. I sold no properties that year. And it was pretty defeating where somebody who thinks that they can do anything and everything is lining up for them and everything happens for a reason. Why? Why am I joining this career in a time in which it is the worst economic time in my entire adulthood that I would have ever seen? But I persevered. I kept going. I had a passion for it. I showed up where I could. I tried new things. And still, I was having a lot of struggles. What I didn't realize at the time was the struggle that was actually happening with speaking to clients, with showing up and doing listing presentations, open houses, all of the things that they don't really teach you about in school. The mechanics of what you're going to do as a person, your day to day things that you're going to do in the industry. We don't really talk a lot about that. And I wish more people did, because I could have prepared myself in terms of how was I going to show up as a human being, as Katie, who came from a rough area, who went through a lot of traumas in her home life, and also found herself in the role that she was because she chose to leave something that she didn't want. That same girl who actually took a lot of her baggage of running away from being in survival mode, she took it with her into this real estate career. And so at this point in time, I'm realizing that I need some help. I had been a couple of years into my career. I was very, very adamantly against joining a team. So it had been suggested to me quite a few times. Hey, like, I don't know if you know what you're doing here, but you need some systems, you need a process, you need some skills, you need to develop who you are as a professional. And the best way to do that is to align yourself with a team and get some guidance and some mentorship, get some deals under your belt, feel some confidence, and let yourself move forward. And I was like so against it, and I couldn't understand why. Well, the reason why was because I had a whole huge part of me that had this big ego. And the ego said, I'm better than that. And the ego had all of these really interesting connections to meanings to things that really had no sense being there. And I didn't know this. I didn't know that my ego was directing this big part of my life, saying all of these things to me internally, unconsciously. What was really happening was I was trying to keep myself safe. I thought that if I could do it on my own and didn't join a team, if I didn't have somebody telling me what to do, then I would be safe. And I know this now. I didn't know it then. But the reason why I thought it was unsafe was because I had grown up in an environment where I was told what to do every day, where my experience with my father was very controlling, very scary. And I didn't get to have my own decisions. I didn't get to show up as a free spirit. I had to survive. I had to manage. I had to try and stay under the radar so that there wasn't a dangerous situation. And when you learn those things, you learn to stay silent. You learn to feel hypercritical of yourself. And the factor of somebody else telling you, okay, here's what you're going to do, even though it may be legitimately, here's the mentorship that you need in your life, that would have been internalized to me as judgment. This person is judging me and showing me how I don't know what I'm doing, how I can't do anything right, how I'm not good enough to do this on my own. That's what was going on underneath the surface. So every time somebody said, hey, like, get some skills, go and join a team, make some money at this, I would say no and have a reason and excuse as to why I absolutely couldn't do that. But really, what was going on is I was afraid to be told that I was doing something wrong, because internally I was then no good. That came from my childhood. That had nothing to do with real estate. I had no idea that that would be triggered in me as I stepped into a role that I thought, I'm loving this. This is meant for me. I have skills that are great at this. I did really well in my studies and my courses, and I got high 90s in my exams. Yet I was failing as a salesperson, not because I had no idea what I was doing. I had every possible tangible studying skill. Ask me a question about writing a clause of condition or contracts or what is the scenario and what are you going to do, I knew it. I made it my business to know it. It was important to me, but I couldn't function. I couldn't function out in the world. I couldn't let my personality show because I was so scared. I was so hyper aware of being in survival mode from my past that those who were around me, clients and prospective clients, as well as my peers as other real estate agents, started to really feel dangerous on an unconscious level, because I was triggering all of my stuff that I hadn't dealt with, all the stuff I hadn't healed from in my younger years, that I just picked up my belongings and moved to another province. But the stuff shows up, and it may show up in your life in a really different way from somebody else. It may be the feeling like, I don't know how to get ahead. I'm working so hard. Nothing is working. Why am I trying so hard? And all of the stuff is not coming together. There may be connections to things that are actually going on that are self-sabotage. I know this because I've lived this. I have been the biggest expert at self-sabotage because I was afraid to succeed. Because if I succeeded, that would mean that version of me was somebody who was able to talk to people. I had so much social anxiety that I would tremble. My hands would sweat and shake, and I couldn't function. It was like my body was vibrating inside in the worst possible way. And I couldn't get words out of my mouth a lot of the time in conversations. And I hid that because I was afraid that if I showed people how intimidated I was to actually speak to another individual, regardless of who they were, and that if I showed that, I was afraid I would be perceived as weak and worthless. How could I possibly be somebody that would be a top negotiator in one of the toughest real estate markets in North America? The Toronto market, the GTA market is very competitive as a real estate agent. You got to have skills that you pull out, that you are able to communicate well. And I thought this, and therefore that meant if I feel this way about myself and I can't make myself function to do the things like prospecting. Number one thing I was having a problem with, I couldn't prospect because I couldn't put myself out there because it meant dealing with all of the garbage I was talking about to myself on a daily. It meant dealing with that. So the longer I didn't do it, the longer I wasn't successful. So eventually I joined a team. I said, okay, I'm going to do the thing that's hard. I'm going to find a way to get to the other side of this. But at this point, still, I hadn't actually acknowledged that I had all of these issues that were going on. I'm talking from the state of Katie today, who is, now a master NLP practitioner who has been through so many healing modalities and the actual trainings to change my neurology and my state and the way that I view myself in the world and building confidence and actually having success at this point in my life. I'm speaking from that version today. But the girl, I want to say the little girl, because I still hadn't dealt with that little girl inside of me back then who joined a team, who thought she was just going to get the skills she needed. It turns out she joined a team that was the most triggering place emotionally and mentally that could have ever existed for me. I really believe that we are attracted to the people, the circumstances, the career, the relationships that we need in order to heal. So if you're experiencing something that feels really difficult and you felt like, oh, this was aligned for me to do this thing, I felt a lot of drive for me to do this thing or meet this person or be in this partnership or this job or this team, and then things are really not going well and things are really tough, know that there's probably something in there that's on repeat. There's a pattern. There was a pattern to my life that I had not yet identified, and therefore I was repeating. I was repeating an issue I had not yet discovered was a problem. And I stayed for a very long time in a team setting that took advantage of my skills, that took advantage of my work ethic, that took advantage of the fact that I really wanted to do well by my team lead. Because I had taken with me all of that baggage from my childhood that said, Katie, do a good job, show up, do better. Make sure the household is okay. Make sure you're safe by never objecting to anything that is asked of you. I took that with me into my role. It made me a great team member. I sold a lot of homes. I made a lot of money during that era where people thought my life was fantastic. I bought a 5,000 square foot home. I bought a lake. I owned this beautiful chalet with my husband at 25 years old that you'd say dreams were made of. But it was really built on a fake persona of pushing down all my fear and anxiety and showing up in a space to push to do the thing that was hardest without actually having awareness on why it was hard. So if you've ever heard the thing of like, do the thing that makes you uncomfortable, and if you do something enough or you spend 1,000 hours at something, you will become an expert in it and it becomes easier every time you do something. There's a whole lot of truth to that. And there's a whole lot more that nobody is telling you. Where if you are pushing yourself to spend 1,000 hours doing the thing that is really difficult for you internally, I'm not talking about learning to run a marathon. That's going to be challenging in its own way. You spend enough time building that muscle and pushing yourself, you're going to get to incredible places. You're going to run that marathon and succeed. But when it comes to things that cause you to have to dive into who you are as a person, why you show up in a certain way, why you struggle to talk to people, or why it's difficult to sell, or why it's hard to prospect, when you start pushing yourself to do those kinds of things in a way that is not congruent to who you are with your internal values, it will cause chaos. And it may not show on the outside. I was making money at the worst possible, just rock bottom time in my life. I was making a good amount of money. No money in the world was going to appease the amount of turmoil that was happening for me internally. Because every time I was forced to prospect and pick up a phone or do door knocking or do an open house or do things in the proper way in which you're going to get a client and you're going to get a sale, you're going to sell real estate. Every time I was pushed to do something in a way that it felt wrong to me and I couldn't understand why it felt wrong. I thought it's just I haven't done this enough. I need to keep just doing this thing that somebody's telling me to do. The more I did it, the more I would leave an appointment and cry in my car all the way home. The more I couldn't look at myself in the mirror because I didn't like the version of me I'd become. I wore all black, my hair pulled back. I couldn't see how the world had any joy in it. It was just do what you're forced to do, and other people are going to take from you from your hard work for it. But hey, this is the best that you could do, Katie, because you couldn't do it on your own. And it was the hardest time in my life because I couldn't face my own demons. I couldn't face the fact that I needed to let myself come out as an individual who had so much to offer. I couldn't let that part show because I had been told that I'd never done anything right for so long in my early childhood. The stuff comes with you. So maybe you've experienced things in your life where you've never told anyone you've been through those hardships. Maybe you have a family dynamic that has been less than easy growing up. Maybe your situation is completely different than mine, but you can see how the struggles you've had in your early years have affected who you are as an individual. I want to open this space up because the reason that I opened a brokerage was not because it was the natural succession of becoming successful. I was in the top 4% of GTA agents for a long time. It wasn't because of the numbers that made sense to open a brokerage. It was actually because my heart said, at this point in time, there is no place in which my soul resides in this industry that isn't a safe space that I've created for myself. I needed to break free of whatever the confines were of the regular corporate enterprise to how organized real estate is and how brokerages are created. There's nothing wrong with it if it feels right for you, but it did not feel right for me. I felt controlled and restrained. I felt boring. At a certain point in time, I felt like it just was not for me anymore. And that's why the brokerage was open to really create this safe space for others to grow as an individual into whichever version of you that this industry is calling you to be. So 16 years in right now, I ended up doing the thing that my heart was really calling for me to do for a very, very long time. And change can be quite difficult. When I realized that the job I was working at with this team, where I'd gotten the skills that I needed, where I'd really helped to develop some incredible processes, and there was a great amount of external boxes that were checked for being on this team. But I never complained. I never expressed how unhappy I actually was there. I never brought forward to the table in a conversation with my team lead and other people that I worked with that I had a problem with the way that we were functioning as a whole there. I never said anything, and that was my issue to bear because you can't sit by and complain in private about something not being good for you, but not being willing to either make the change or identify the issue and have a conversation about it. I wasn't willing because I was scared. I was scared that I was going to be judged for saying something, for speaking up. So my issues were still coming forward. So there was a point in time when I realized I gotta leave this team. It is so hard because I am terrified that if I leave this team, I'm going to go back to being no good, is what happened in my brain. I'm going to go back to not being able to do this on my own, that the only reason I'm successful is because somebody else is giving it to me. And I had to face those demons yet once again. And this was the time in which I went through studying as an NLP master practitioner and really getting good at understanding my brain and how I functioned. and moving through all of the energy that had been holding me back for so long. And I, in 2018, left that team and I ended up going to another brokerage in another city where I started a clean slate. And I actually left that team without the ability to have any of the connections I had with past clients. So I wasn't able to continue building my career with all of the huge amount of networking of clients that I had. I had to start from square one because one of the reasons I stayed so long with the team was a contract that I had signed that said that all of my past clients would never again be my clients. I had to leave them with the team. When I was on the team, I never got to receive any of the awards. None of the huge numbers that I was producing, I never got to receive recognition for all of the work I was doing because I had signed a contract that said that my recognition went to the team. At first, I thought that's fine. Of course, it's a team effort. But once I got years and years into it, I started to realize there was a part of me that needed to be acknowledged for the work that I was doing in some fashion or form. And there was many, many great things that happened during that time period. But the mental, emotional part for me that was very triggering was all to do with me. It was my projection of putting myself into a spot where I was going to have to face all of the elements from my childhood that I hadn't faced yet. And they would show up in different people whether they were aware or not. It was the way I was perceiving their actions, the industry, what was going on at work. That was the point. So I ended up leaving in 2018 with a lot of support from people I had met along the way to say, you can do this. Like, you are incredible. You can do this. And without those people cheering me on, I would have still been stuck where I was, feeling very regretful for the fact that I knew I had more in me to give, to show, to receive. And I ended up at this brand new brokerage where I was able to hit my sales numbers again as a top producer within 6 months, all on my own, starting from scratch, not having that sphere of influence that we start off with or that we build our client base over the years with. I had none of that. I had to start from scratch and I had to do it as me without a team. I had to show the world who I really was, and I had to let myself be seen and be acknowledged. So it was an incredible day to receive an award for the very first time after being in this industry for 10 years and a top producer for many of those years. I received my first award in my name. And it was a really big deal. It wasn't because it was an external big deal of like, here's your trophy. It was because to me, internally, it meant I did the thing that scared me most. I did the thing that I didn't think I was capable of doing. It was a sign that everything was going to be okay. This is it, Katie. Energy again. And then there was more. There's always more. Wherever you are, there is always more. Whenever you think this is it, I'm here, there is always more. Because we are growing as human beings continually. And so I then, a short time later, ended up finding myself drawn to moving to the Kingston area. And this is where we have our beautiful boutique brokerage, Blue Moon Realty. And I'm going to really get into the details of why this brokerage is such an incredible, dynamic, different version from what you will see as a brokerage in future videos. But for now, as I'll leave you for today with a little glimpse as to the different things that happen as struggles as you hit your check markers for what you want to do in life. I want to continue to go deeper with me on this channel more and more because there's so much that I want to share that is going to be helpful to wherever you are in your career. I have coached people who are just getting into the industry. I have coached those who are looking to hit their next income level. I have also coached people who are top producers who are really facing these mental emotional roadblocks that I went through in their own different unique ways. And I just have such an incredible space in my heart that is meant to be doing this work in this industry and bringing together all of the skills and the knowledge and experience that I've had over the years in so many different aspects of life into this one place. So I want to thank you again for being here with me today and to invite you to dive deeper. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you've listened to the end here, I just send you so much love and energy in your day for you to just fuel your own passions. And join me here next time. For the next video, there's going to be a lot more to learn and to find out everything that they didn't teach you in real estate school and how that is going to help you to be successful in your own life and business.